This week, Alex slumlords cash in on a housing crisis.
Bonke bakbhatal.
Labantu laba 42 banginika 300 rand a month.
That is illegal. It's not their land. They've been exposing people to danger.
And later, the pain of parenting a gangster. This is Checkpoint, and I'm Nkepile Mabuse. South Africa's housing backlog widens every year. Latest figures from the Institute of Race Relations place the deficit at 2 million units. The recent flooding in high-density Alexandra, north of Johannesburg, once again reminded us how dire things are for the homeless. One of the worst affected areas was Situetla in Alex, where wild waters snatched a child from her father's arms. A heartbreaking story, but not a new one, as seasonal summer rains bring with them hard truths. As producer Busisiwe Gumete and cameraman Ashley Market found out, where there's a vacuum, others will cash in.
Juko Matose is salvaging what's left of his shack at the edge of the Yaks-Gay River. Flash floods took away most of his and 200 other illegally built homes several weeks ago. Although long declared unsafe for human habitation, many continue to live here. Matose arrived in South Africa from Zimbabwe 5 years ago, hoping to find work. It may be Matose's first experience of flooding, but government has been dealing with it for years. Keeping residents away from the flood-prone riverbank is nigh impossible. It's one of the few places where there's available land, and Alex is close to work opportunities in Sandton. Matose lives cheek by jowl with other African immigrants as well as locals. In November, President Jacob Zuma and Gauteng Premier David Makhura again promised alternative housing for the latest flood victims.
The medium-term plan to find a space to take these people, to put them in the temporary housing, while they will be solving the problem for the long term.
These promises are nothing new to residents. In 2008 and 2013, when riverbank shacks were washed away after heavy storms, government promised to act. But it's not easy to police or govern this area. As soon as authorities get back into their cars, the post-disaster building boom begins. Often, temporary homes provided by government are converted into rental property, and stands are sold to build more shacks. Matose's new site is still too close to the riverbank.
I know Kuri, ngitatama chance lang hlalikon, and I have to, and I supposed to.
Matose pays monthly rent of 300 rands to his so-called landlord, Jonas Mabila. Around here, he's known as Mdala, the old one.
Fikilela, by 2011, after 3 months in Talukrant.
Another tenant, Mbuso Sitolo, told us that Mdala claims to own the land around here. While we were busy interviewing Sitole, Mdala arrived. He was upset that Sitole, a man he says doesn't live around here, was talking to journalists. Mdala offered to do the interview instead. He told us he first came here in 1973.
Ngisebenza abantu mina nginyanga. Nakhona ukuthi ngize la ngilethwe ngamadlusi. Baza bangitshela bathi bona bafuna usihlala la. Yipho laba ngiphume apha endlini la ngihlala nomfazi. Ngizohlala la ngibeke izinto zabo la. That's why ngathatha izinto zonke zabo ngazozibeka.
As Alexander expanded, Mdala's secret space was exposed and people began encroaching on his turf.
Never abantu laba never figure la. Bathi bacele indawo yohlala ngithi anginandawo mina. Bathi hayi sibona indawo nyana ikhona la. Ngithi alright angifuni umuntu aze nesenke lakhe. Manje into ngizenza yona ngizowakhela umkhukhu. Ngiyenza njalo kubiya kufika abantu kuzobiya kube umkhukhu yelengana ko42.
So imukhukhu le A42 kulabo abantu abayi42 bonke bakubhadala.
Labantu laba be42 bonke babazama kungisizanyana banginika 300 rand a month.
So 300 rand from umkhukhu inoyi1. Ubayenzelani?
Kwenza ukuthi maybe kumoshakele athi umkhukhu umoshakele kufanele ngilungise umkhukhu.
42 shacks at 300 rands each secures Mdala a tax-free monthly income of 12,600 rands. He sees the rental paid to him as gratitude for his generosity, even though he doesn't officially own the land.
Abanye abantu bathi akumelanga uchacha abantu la. Ngoba umhlaba akuso wakho. So bachajelana abantu.
Ngangabachachi kanjalo ngibachacha ngoba material wami.
Although he uses discarded building material, he thinks charging residents every month is fair. Mdala lives in his wife's RDP house in East Bank in Alex, but keeps a shack here for practicing his traditional medicine. He says he was devastated when the latest floods hit. People living here are not just tenants, he says, but family.
Ngisobhlungu nami. Ngibathatha njengengane zami noma ngithi into yeso nabo babathi mdala kwakuphelile.
The children Mdala speaks of include Shadrach and Cynthia Chauke, the parents of the toddler who was swept away. The search for the girl brought home the dangers of living along the Yukske. Shadrach Chauke told President Zuma how he had tried to escape the raging waters by climbing a tree, his daughter firmly in his grasp, or so he thought.
Bangitshelile ukuthi umntwana ushonile ngathi mina nami ngiyangibona ukuthi njani. Ayikho into ngizoyenza imali zami zihambile lokho mhlambe ngizothi ngizokhipha 2 rand ngimnike.
It's an ever-present rainy season fear around here, says Chipo Msalabate, who managed to get her 3-year-old to safety.
Ngibe ngisaba kakhulu because mangena endlini ngifike ngithatha umntwana manje ngiphuma angiphushela muva. That's why ngibe ngisaba kakhulu ngibona ukuthi lapha igate angisaphumi.
Chipo, also from Zimbabwe, took refuge in a nearby tavern. Her husband had been at work when the river came down in flood.
Into de yami ifike ingena lapha sihlala khona. Maphuma afika ngitshela ukuthi indlu akuna nix iground kuphela.
She sees him as a landlord and says he's more reasonable than many around here.
And ngine 6 years ngihlala lapha kaMdala angizange ngithola iproblem.
Thomas Sambo has also cashed in on flood disasters over the years. After floods hit Alex in 2013, he subdivided his shebeen to provide shelter for displaced victims. Now he charges 300 rands per room. He sees nothing wrong with his scheme.
akufani ukuthi ngiyoyenza esigangeni nganikiwanga indawo ngithi wozani izorent.
The 10-year flood line along the Jokskei River, there shouldn't be anybody staying there.
Keith Khoza of the Department of Human Settlements in Gauteng says landlords like Sambo are breaking the law.
That is illegal. It's not their land. And for that matter, they've been exposing people to danger by renting people at a place where it's along the riverbank, you know, and some of them are the victims of the recent floods. So that is criminality, and it must be dealt with as a criminal act.
Sambo doesn't agree. He thinks he's providing a service. It's a headache government has been grappling with for 20 years.
See, one of the challenges we're dealing with now, you've got a waiting list since 1996 of people who have applied for houses. Those people are still waiting. You know why? Because people who went into informal settlements expect to be given priority over people who have applied for houses. So they all rushed to Struika because they saw progress happening there, and they thought that was a way of them being prioritized.
Of course, jumping the queue courtesy of corrupt officials doesn't help.
We also admit that there was a problem of corruption in terms of how people were allocated houses in the list. And that's why the department has set up a team that does investigations.
Making the land bordering the river inaccessible and impossible to build on seems a logical solution, not according to Keith Khoza.
If you have visited that area, you would notice it is in a hidden area. You would not easily pick up that there are people staying there unless you walk in there, which has been a problem. But I think also...
Is this something that you figured out after the flood hit?
No. We've known and we've encouraged people to move out of there. Also, in terms of legislation, if a person has been staying there, you can't just remove them. You must build alternative accommodation for them. Now, if you haven't budgeted for that at that time, it's difficult or it is empowered to move them to an alternative accommodation which is not available. Now, in the aftermath of the disaster, at least when it was declared a disaster area, money has been made available.
Khoza says yet another project to clean up Stwetla is on the cards.
I think there are lessons that we're learning. We're using Alexandra as a case study. What is going to be a defining element of that project is that when we relocate people, we're going to freeze any settlement in areas where we've relocated people. We'll demolish and not allow people to build any shacks or temporary accommodation.
Since the floods, government has relied on NGOs to provide shelter for those whose homes floated away. Khoza says there will be temporary housing for those on the waiting list.
We're not going to take them to houses now, favoring them over and above people who've been in waiting lists since 1996. By the way, people who are staying in Struika, the majority of them are not even South African. Some of them don't even qualify. And that's a matter that we would have to deal with Home Affairs.
And it's a matter residents of one of the most densely populated areas of Johannesburg are hoping will be resolved in their lifetimes.
After the break, raising a gangster, parents' heartbreak. In October, Checkpoint told of the war between the so-called Gupta family gang and the Alaska gang in Sebokeng, southern Gauteng. After our broadcast, parents came forward to tell their stories of life with a gangster child. Producer Sebokeng and cameraman Tsepo Dlamini have the details. When Checkpoint spoke to troubled youth in Sebokeng 2 months ago, they were boastful about the number of people they'd allegedly killed. This 19-year-old boy we met in Evaton belonged to a group called the Alaskers. At the time, the Alaskers had been at murderous loggerheads with another group, the Gupta family. 25-year-old Mlongo, not his real name, is one of the Gupta family gang's founding members. Both groups told us gangs are all about protection. Things came to a head in September when 23-year-old Vusi Nyembe, an Alaskan, was killed. His mother, Ellen Nyembe, was well aware that her son was a gangster.
Aze athenge zona lempahla lesi izibhala eMalaska ngitsho namathupisi wakhona namakepese wakhona uvusi bekafaka lempahla lezi zinjalo.
Alan says Vusi had been in trouble before. In 2012 he survived a brutal attack.
Bamkapa ithema bathi bathola ukuthi hayi ngathi ufile kanti akafa bona bebaqabanga ukuthi uvusi ufile kanti uvusi akafanga ke bese kukhona abanye abagijima baya kubhuti wakhe bafike batshela ubhuti wakhe hey mntwana hawukiyani kamani bayikapile ka 15 ka dipet ferroko wasuka ke ubhuti wakhe wagijima waya lapha maka lapho bese ufuna imoto ke emngani wakhe lapho uthatha uvusi umisa esibhedlela uvusi wahlala ICU.
Then his luck ran out. Ellen was at work when she received the fateful phone call. She found her son at home, unconscious, with multiple stab wounds. 7 young men, believed to be members of the Gupta family gang, were charged with Vusi's murder. They also face a charge of attempted murder for the stabbing of another member of the Alaska gang, as well as charges of public violence and arson for allegedly burning down a family home of an Alaskan. Ellen does not want revenge killings.
Ngizengakhuluma nabo ngathi awuhle ngiyacela ngicela ukuthi bantu nize esifeni nje kuphela makuphelile omunye nomunye aye kubo asikaqedi sibalindile laba basejele batsho njalo bathi sibabalindile bathi bona bazofisa isihluku esihlula savusi.
She wants formal justice for her son's killers.
Mina bengithanda ukuthi bavalelwe ngoba bayenzile ngithi lento le bengithanda ukuthi bavalelwe vele nje.
Ellen now cares for her late son's child, her 2-year-old granddaughter.
Usikhulisele yena shemntanakhe amwasha ekseni amise creche amlande creche afike naye la endlini amenzela ukudla adla aqeda lapho ke uzahamba naye lapha estradini aloku ambambile ke.
She says Vusi may have been a gangster in the streets, but at home he was an angel. Coming up, gang wars spread to other Vaal towns. With no evident strategy to eradicate gang violence in Sebokeng and Evaton, it has spread to other towns in the Vaal Triangle. Members of the Mupeme gang bid farewell to another fallen soldier. 17-year-old Sebokeng was stabbed and bludgeoned with a pike, allegedly by members of the Diamonds gang, sworn enemies of the Mupeme. Sebokeng was the first of 3 victims killed in a recent spate of gang violence. His mother, Myburgh, is shaken by her son's brutal death at the local sports ground.
ha ke nahane hore ke tla e lebala bophelo ba ka kaofela. Teboha ntse a re hoeletsa a re no mama ke ba ambulance ka ke a shwa hle ke a shwa ke re ambulance ya tla ngwanaka.
As Nopi was giving up hope, the emergency services finally arrived.
Ambulance has a tlameha ho tsamaya lebidi le flat. Ha e kgone ho tsamaya. Ho tlameha emelo ambulance e nngwe hape.
All 4 tires of the ambulance had been slashed, presumably so that Teboho couldn't receive timeliest medical attention. Paramedics were even threatened. To top it all, the replacement ambulance, which arrived escorted by police, didn't have the right equipment.
Ambulance ke a ema ho tla dikoloi tse ding tse 3 ba go nidia metšhini ngwaneng ka morao.
Teboho never made it to hospital.
Ba etsa metšhini ba mkenya metšhini ba ntse ba metsa go fihlela ba hlokahalla ka moo ka metseng ka moo.
The Mopeme retaliated, killing a member of the Diamonds a few hours later. He and Teboho were buried on the same day at the same cemetery under police guard. Nopi had high hopes for her son.
Benginamaphupho amaningi kabi ngaye ngoba bebuhlala esikolweni. Nizitshela ukuthi ngoba njengumama nginganababa umntana lo asina nendlu. While she mourns her
son and a house he will never build, Kauta Ndaba fears for the life of his son. Kauta and his son were not home when the mob arrived. He says that's the only reason they are both still alive. Kauta was also aware of his son's gang activities, but says he left the Diamonds last year. Then one day they came looking for him.
Before
His only source of income also went up in flames, 3 backyard shacks that were bringing in rent. Nopi and Kauta say it's time for parents to wake up.
We ikutlwa jwang ngwana ha tswa ka tlung a tshwere sebitsa a tshwere septjha kapo ngwana ka ka moreng ya hae o bona rona di dibitsa go wena le rona re le batswadi ke rona re tlamileng re khalmele bana ba rona ngwana ka o khona gore a ye ntlung ya motho a lo batla ngwana motho a tshwere septjha a tshwere phanga a kape mtswadi wa mo a sa thole mang. Ha ke qeta mo nna hape ke fa ngwana ka tšhelete o palama ke mo balisa ke misa Evaton family ya ka relative family ya ka mara ke tseba ngwana ka o yentse eng.
That's all from us this week. Please do give us your feedback. Our Twitter handle is @checkpoint_ENCA and our email address checkpoint@enca.com. Thanks for watching. I'm Ngepile Mabuse.